Um, Misty, are you ready if we jump to the
Yes.
interview now?
Let's
Okay.
talk with Terry.
All right. So Terry Grable is, or I said your last name wrong there. Sorry, Terry.
Grable.
Yeah, Grable is a middle school science teacher who has just in 2021 did something crazy. He did a big year, a birding big year. So Terry, I'll let you introduce yourself really quick. And can you tell us what a birding big year is?
First of all, crazy is probably the best word. One of your questions that you forwarded to me was, how did you decide to do the big year? And crazy is probably the best answer to that. I'm a middle school educator and I'm in my 30th year. I teach 8th grade science to Fremont Middle School. And I've been working on getting my kids engaged, getting my students engaged in birding the whole time. And last year, things kind of boiled over.
So yeah, so you decided to do a big year, which is the activity where you try to see as many species in a calendar year as possible. And you kept your big year to just the state of Michigan. So you wanted to see as many species in the state of Michigan as possible in a year. So let's come back to that in a second. But first, how did you get into birding? What is it that drew you into it?
I really don't remember. I remember being into birds my entire life. And when I was a little boy, my CB handle was Birdman, and that's what my dad called me. And I remember at that time I had a Peterson guide, and I remember looking in there, and Roger Torrey Peterson, of course, said, you know, keep your bird list and get involved with other birders. But I didn't know any other birders. So I was always interested in birds, but it was limited to mom and dad's farm, and while I was driving the tractor, and grandma's backyard, until I got to my undergraduate years at CMU. I found out there were other weirdos out there that were interested the same way I was. So
yeah, that's so you've been birding since before you could really remember why you were birding, basically.
My earliest memory was at the first house I remember that we lived in. Dad, a hummingbird had gotten caught in our breezeway, and Dad had got a jar on it and was going to release it. And I remember that was the first. That's my first birding memory, but that was probably 7 years old.
Wow. So. So you've been a birder for a long time, and I know there's a lot of things you enjoy about birding, but at some point you must have decided, I really like the listing part and I'm gonna do a big year. Is that how did that come about?
Yeah, that was strange. Even as an adult, after I was out of college, and keeping birding in my classroom as much as I could, but not listing, just being fascinated by birds. And I'm thankful, I think, that I spent that much time just watching bird behavior. I loved the bird feeders, and it wasn't until Andrea and I married about 12 years ago that we went to our first birding festival, the biggest week in American birding, and she fell in love with it. She wasn't a birder at that time, but she fell in love with it, and because we were doing it together, it just blossomed from there. And I think it was probably a lot to do with the COVID lockup, and having a lot of spare time to think after school and things like that. In December of 2020, I told Andrea, I think I want to do a big year, and I think she breathed a pretty heavy sigh of relief when I said it was just going to be a Michigan one rather than a continental one. Not that a continental one would be possible on a teacher's salary, but I didn't want to do the Ken Kaufman thing and eat cat food, so I decided to limit it to Michigan. And it was interesting. A lot of people ask me, well, why did you decide to do it? And I don't honestly remember. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. Um,
Famous last words, Austin. Seemed like a good idea at
yes.
the time. No.
Well, it goes along with the other question. What did you do to prep or plan for your big year? Oh my goodness. I decided I was going to do it, and then all of a sudden I was doing it, and I could have spent a lot more time prepping probably.
Well, that's the kind of the nice thing about doing a state big year, though, right? Is
Yeah.
that pretty much everything's drivable, although Michigan is a very big state, I'm sure, as
About
you
10 and a
know.
half hours from the Keweenaw down to Berrien County.
Oh man, yeah. So you can drive a lot, but doing a state big year does mean you can stay pretty local and you can drive everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm sure as the year went on, you probably started to have a list of target birds. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely. And as I was listening to your description of eBird reports, I found initially I was watching the rare bird reports, and it didn't take me long to realize that a lot of them that were popping up were seasonal rarities. And if I was doing a season list or something like that, that probably would have been pretty important. But I knew that I was doing a year list, and I knew a lot of these birds that were popping up on the seasonal list as they're coming into Michigan, I was going to get very, very easily later. And I learned to kind of budget my efforts a little bit, because the first brown-headed cowbird report, was in the southern counties, and I could have run, made a mad dash, but that would have been kind of, I guess, a waste of time. And that was one of the other things I had to accept, was that there's certain things that I wasn't going to be able to do that I really loved, and that was go to a location and just see what kind of birds I found around there. Like you said, as I got closer to once spring migration was done in late May, I started to look more at the needs reports, and I had those hourly, of course, and the WhatsApp connection. So I was able to target birds rather than locations. And you're right. Here in West Michigan, I'm in Newaygo County, and relatively centrally located. I could get to pretty much everywhere in the Lower Peninsula within 4 hours. UP, I didn't anticipate how many times I was going to cross that bridge.
So it sounds like a few things you kept in mind were, don't chase the things that are going to be just something you see in the summer in earlier in the year. And then, I would imagine the real rarities, the things that were vagrants more than just seasonal rarities, were a big focus, and you kind of pick up the other birds as you're chasing those.
Yeah,
Is that accurate?
absolutely. Yeah, and it didn't take long to recognize when this huge rare bird, with especially in probably late March, when the migrants started to come in. It didn't take long for me to realize that a lot of them were going to be easy. So I had to kind of weed through it a little bit to see what birds I don't remember seeing. But because I had never seriously chased rarities before, some of it was, I don't know if I didn't see these because I wasn't searching for them, or if they're really unusual. And I think I missed some in the spring because I didn't recognize, for example, there was a painted bunting just north of Tawas Point that was at a feeder for a while, and I didn't recognize the urgency, and I didn't ever had another opportunity for a painted bunting.
Yeah. So part of it is being really familiar with the birds in Michigan and knowing what's going to be easy to get, what's
Yep.
going to be kind of medium hard, and what might be a one shot only thing. So thinking that a painted bunny might be something you could get later, and then realizing, oh no, that was probably a one shot only thing. That,
Sure. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, when I never dreamed that I would be doing day trips to central UP, because when else am I going to get a common eider?
Right.
There's certain things like that um, never would have dreamed.
Yeah. So
And
we're name dropping some species here. I kind of wonder, what were some of your favorite bird highlights for the year then? What were some of the cool birds?
well, it's a huge list because having never really chased and kind of been a serendipitous birder, I go to some place and I see what birds are there. I add a lot of birds to my life list. There
Hmm.
was a, well, I guess one of my favorites was the spoonbill because
Mm.
I love, I guess part of what I really have enjoyed throughout my birding career, if you will, is the people I meet. And you, did you get to see the spoonbill?
I
You,
did.
you
Yeah.
drive up there and it's hard to miss because the road is lined with people with scopes, and I find that I guess that kind of gets my blood going too. I enjoy people, and that was kind of a surreal situation too. That was in July. That was actually species 300 for me, and
Wow.
yeah, that was a big 300, and that was the first time somebody came up to me and says, "Oh, you're Terry Grable." I was like, yeah, they've been following me on eBird. It's like, wait a second, man. I just the average birder at best, it probably drives more than most people. So the
Well,
school bill was exceptional, and you know, the wood stork that was in Ludington, I dipped on that the first time I got up there. It was at dusk and I couldn't find it, and I came home and I tore up the next morning before church and got it, and actually got back in time for our worship service.
that's pretty impressive. Yeah, sometimes it's those social experiences you have while birding
Oh,
that,
for sure.
and that was really fun because you get to see. I don't think a lot of bird list or bird non-bird listers realize how social bird listing can be. A lot of times people drive together to chase the rarities, and then when you get there, it's kind of like you see a bunch of old friends that you
Yeah.
from around the state, and you all gather around this rare bird to get a chance to see it. So.
I suspect some of that camaraderie as far as traveling and chasing together was limited a little bit being on the heels of COVID.
Mm.
There was a lot of, well, in some places we weren't very well socially distanced looking at this spoonbill, um, as far as traveling together. I think some of that might have been a little bit limited.
Yeah, yeah, that has changed things for sure.
Yeah, and I
So
think the social aspect is I can't emphasize it enough because no, I guess you know I've been a fisherman all my life too, and if someone finds a good fishing hole, they aren't interested in sharing it or taking you to it. But I find you know in birding the community, even the people that I was in heated, um, not combat, that's the wrong word, um, competition with. Um, Maria Rust was hot on my heels the whole year, and we shared a lot of things, and we led each other to a lot of birds because that's just the way it is.
yeah, birding community is a great community, and although there's always bad apples here and there, there's a lot of good apples,
Yeah,
like
for
a
sure.
disproportionately large number of good apples, I would say, in the birding community. And it's really neat to see. Yeah, so for those of you not familiar with big ears, they can get quite competitive, although there's no technical like official overseeing them.
And there's
There
not
is
really a prize either.
there's definitely not really a prize. Nobody handed you a trophy at the end of the year,
No.
uh, but there is the eBird top 100 list where a lot of folks will review and see who's in the top 100 for their state for the year or whatever, um, and so that can make it really fun to kind of monitor that
That
over
was
the
a
year.
little bit of the kiss of death for me with I deal with anxiety issues sometimes anyway, and then when all of a sudden I was in the top 100, I thought, are you kidding me? There's like 25,000 people on eBird in Michigan, and then I was in the top 50, and then I was in the top 10, and yeah, it was and then you start to think, well, I wonder if I can be number one, and I'm watching this darn list every hour between classes. Um, yeah.
Well, so you've shared a few of your non-birding highlights too, but were there any other highlights that stuck out? Any individual experiences that you know will just be really memorable for you from the this last year?
Oh, absolutely. My love-hate relationship with Point Mulle. Um, I was not prepared for how big Point Mulle is, and every time I went there, it was uncomfortable weather. And one afternoon I was down there by myself walking, and the thunder started, and I thought, oh no, I'm out in the middle of this marsh, and it just started blowing and raining.
Oh my.
And I called Andrea, my birding partner at home, and she talked me down off the ledge a little bit, and she says, "Go a little farther." And finally, at dusk, as the storm was rolling in, I was able to see a little bit of a flash of kind of a dark purple wing, and I got up there, and there was a white-faced ibis waiting for me.
Uh,
There's hundreds of stories like that and many of them I had people to share it with, and other times I was just standing there by myself, just smiling ear to ear.
yeah, just to show people, Point Mouillet, if for those of you that have not been there, is one of the largest reconstructed wetlands in all of Lake Erie. And you go out onto these dikes along this, what they call the banana, and you can go miles and miles, and you're very exposed. And I have been there when a storm starts to come in. It is very unnerving because you're like,
You
there's
are the
no
highest spot
safety.
out there.
Yeah. It's just cattails and phragmites and you, and
Yeah.
you're taller than most of that up on the dikes there. So yeah, that's really neat, Terry. That sounds, I'm just getting jealous hearing all of these awesome stories, because big years are just a really fun thing, and just any kind of bird listing. But I do want to know, so you've been a teacher for many years now. I'm curious if your big year impacted your teaching at all, or just in general, how are some of the specific ways you incorporate birding into teaching?
Well, I've always kept bird posters up in the classroom, and it fits real well with my science curriculum. I can tie birding in with the phenology as far as seasonal movements, and tie that in with climate change and how the food supply boom matches the bird migration and their hatching, and how some birds are having real trouble with that, because they aren't like me and you. They can't plan their trip based on availability of food. Years ago, I don't know how many years ago, Cornell University used to, on their Facebook page, have migration madness during the NCAA basketball tournament, and the kids would they'd pit one species against another, and the kids would vote on it, and the kids got really wrapped up into looking at birds that way. So the kids have always known I've been into birding, and when the movie The Big Year finally was released on DVD, I orchestrated, probably poorly, but orchestrated as many ways as I could to bring that movie into the classroom. So all of my kids got to see it, and they all got to see the competition. Of course, teenage boys, it's all about, the competition. So they kind of were interested that way. And I've got a number of students that I still bird with. In fact, one of the young men that I birded with since he was in 6th grade, he's a senior this year. He was with me for almost all of the first 300 or 200 anyway species that I found this year. So I try to do it a number of different ways. And every year they say, Mr. Grable, when are you going to do a big year? And I told them, probably never. And then I did. And it was interesting because they were my biggest cheerleaders. Most of them opened up an eBird account just so they could follow me and watch. And every Monday they were wanted to hear my stories and see my pictures and things like that. So I try to keep it as much. I have a folder, I have a binder of activities that I bring into, and I can bring birding into the realm of math and language arts and social studies and science. And I'm fortunate to be working with 13 or 14-year-old kids that are eager. They're looking for ways to chew things up and make it part of their real life. So
Yeah. Well, that's
no, I was going to say one more thing. In '99, I actually started taking some of my students up to CMU's biological station on Beaver Island, and and those kids have been involved with a lot of community service or bird community service related projects, as well as introducing them to eBird and how they can be part of the citizen science program.
Terry, really inspirational to hear about the ways that you impacted your students with birds. It just warms my heart. I used to teach for a little while, and
Mhm.
I would have some struggles with the older high schoolers, but the younger high schoolers,
Yeah.
the first, like you said, the first time they see a bird through binoculars, it really changes their perspectives on what these little things are. You start noticing their habits and the way they move, and just start thinking about, wow, that's a tiny creature that's doing a lot of stuff. It's really inspirational.
Yeah, all
Um,
the little brown birds aren't the same, and they never have considered that.
yeah, exactly. I want to come back to you in a second here,
Yeah,
Terry, and we've got a lot of good questions in the Q&A.
okay.
But before we do that, Misty, I wanted to, since Terry is talking about sharing passion, I thought this might be a good time for you to share your slide about the many ways that you can share birds, because we've talked a lot about sharing rare birds and how that can be a really fun thing and you can add it to your list. But there's many reasons that people like to bird watch, and you've started to hear Terry and I talking about them. So Misty, go ahead and share some of the other ways that you can share birding passion.
Yeah, I would love to share that slide, but my PowerPoint has disappeared from the
Oh,
windows I
okay.
can access.
I'll
But
pull it
I'm
up.
okay, thank you. While you're pulling that up, we did have one question, Terry. What was your final number for your big year?
eBird has it listed at 323. I didn't count the bobwhite quail, which I might have. I didn't count the chucker or Muscovy ducks, but 323 was
Is the official eBird count?
So
right, right.
I'm sharing here too. For those of you that don't follow Michigan big years very closely, 323 is one of the highest numbers ever recorded in a year. So Terry had a lot of stiff competition with Bob and Marie, but 323, I think the largest number ever was 326, if I recall, or
Adam
327.
Byrne had a record of 329.
29.
And
Okay.
then last year, in the COVID year, I didn't know this until you told me when we were wandering around Grand Marais looking for that flycatcher
Oh yes.
that Oliver Q last year broke that. He had 335 last year.
That's right. So,
Oh,
and yeah, so birding's really changed with the internet and everything, but
oh my
yes.
goodness. Yeah,
So
I was talking to Adam and he did his 329 before eBird and before smartphones.
yeah,
It just blows me away.
yeah. So a really, really impressive year. I really, it's awesome. So,
Thank you.
but in terms of sharing passion, so
Yeah. So thinking about sharing your passion for birds, there's lots of different ways to do it, right? One, I don't know if you have the slides up, Elliot, but one way is art. So thinking about art is a really great way to share passion about birds, kind of just, so whether you want to try to draw them yourself or appreciate art, I always ask people, you're a birder if you own a piece of bird art, have a piece of bird clothing, like a bird with clothing with a bird or feathers or something on it. Or, or even if you just like to enjoy the art behind my shoulder was from a postcard from the Pacific Northwest that my husband recreated. He charted it out on a big piece of paper and recreated the art. So you don't have to be an artist. There's lots of ways to enjoy that and be an artist in that way. I'm sorry,
photography.
Elliot. I'm photography.
No, that's
Yeah,
right.
I'm not seeing your screen for some reason,
Oh, okay.
but photography is another great way. Whether you're a professional photographer or you are like Elliot and you're just putting your iPhone against your binoculars and taking photography, like you can appreciate both ends of photography, right? That like stunning picture or just taking, practicing and enjoying it and sitting with birds and nature. Another way that we've talked about is eBird and listing are some really great ways to get out there and enjoy birds. And then also thinking about mindfulness and birding. So, I'm sure Terry and others have done this before, but usually when you sit down at a spot and you do like a sit spot and you wait for 15 minutes, birds and chipmunks and things start to kind of reemerge. They start to pop out and be there, and you can start to open your senses and be mindful through your senses on whether what you're hearing or what you're seeing, maybe even what you're smelling. So maybe leaving the lists behind is a good way for you to go ahead and bird and just be out there and kind of absorb the moment and in the weather. So those are some really great ways to share your passion of birds. And there's many more that we haven't covered, but those are fun ways, or even just like, different illustrations on Facebook. So you fill up, your feed with bird images.
I'm sorry, it seems I didn't put the right slide up. So, but Terry, you're getting us on the last night, which was supposed to be the most refined, and we have everything down packed, and yet here we are, screwed up. But we're still excited about birds, and we're excited about, it's just, birding's such a great hobby. And although we focused a lot in this class about migration and rarities and the kind of thrill of a rare bird, just the act of being in nature and being out birding can really have a lot of mental health benefits. And the more you're aware of your surroundings, the better you will be at protecting those and conserving them and being mindful about how you share rare bird sighting. So with that, so we've got a good number of questions that have come in. So I want to make sure we get to those while we still have Terry here. But Terry, I do just want to say before I forget, thank you for joining us today, because your stories are just really interesting. And I don't know if folks saw in the slide, but birdgoober.com is a great place to go if you would like to learn more about Terry's big year, because he has a blog there where he's got about half the big year up, or a little more than half now. I saw you posted it in August. And you can read all those interesting stories on birdgoober.com about Terry's big year.
Good. I love the mindfulness comment, because as much as I loved the rush of the big year and running to some place and seeing the bird and then running to the next place, what I really missed and what I felt like was my way of birding was exactly what you were describing, and sitting and enjoying and appreciating what's there. I felt like I was really rushed to get things done last year, and I'm anxious to get back to sitting someplace for a while and just seeing how the birds interact with the environment.
Yeah.
I steal a quote from Ken Kaufman. He told me once, when I was asking him about being a better birder, and he told me once that if you enjoy your birding, you're already a good birder.
I like that. Yeah, I stick with that one for sure, because I've gone in and out of birding to where I've been really focused on it, and times where I've stepped away and then been focused again. And so sometimes my knowledge of the bird, if you don't use it, you lose it, kind of thing. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember you now, after I go back out and start birding again. We have some good questions in the Q&A that I'd like to get to just before we leave, and there's some here for you, Terry, and then there's some for us too, Elliot. And thinking back to the beginning of our conversation about what to do when we see a bird, and why can't we possess a live or a dead bird. I was going to go ahead and put in the chat, but wanted to talk about the Michigan Bird Treaty. It really is the treaty just protecting birds. And they have a quote here. It says, the act is it makes it a federal crime to take birds or bird parts, including feathers or killed birds, without special permission from its location. So that is our law. Thank you, Elliot, for putting the link into the chat. And, it does really hark back to a couple of different reasons, like we have birding permits and hunting for certain reasons to help support our wildlife areas, and then also to help control populations. Back in the day when the sanctuary first started, it was underneath the Bird Treaty Act. And I tell people this all the time, but the Canada goose was endangered at that time, and we almost lost the Canada goose. And it wasn't until that Migratory Bird Treaty Act that some regulations came into play and some of these rules started to take place, to where we were able to actually have the success story of the Canada goose now being here and being, in our yards, maybe even a nuisance even, but they play an important role. I'm a nuisance to some. Maybe if they live on a lake and they have grass right up to the lake, they might be like, I want these birds out of here. But that's the important part of the American Treaty Act, and we just don't want to collect bird items because of that. So Elliot,
Right.
did you want to add to that?
No, just that, there was a question about, can you have feathers? Can you have dead birds? And it's just, frankly, no, you cannot have any migratory bird feathers or body parts. And the reason, like Misty just said, well, you can't have it because there was issues with, illegal bird trade or feather trade. But today, even there's still issues with illegal bird trade. And if you have a dead bird in your house, there's no way that somebody would know if you found that bird dead or if you killed that bird, right? If you pick up a feather off the ground, there's no way for the authorities to know if you found that feather on the ground or if you harassed a bird and made it fly away and then took the feathers that were left behind, right? And so that's why you can't pick up feathers, that's why legally you can't pick up feathers. That's why legally you can't take a dead bird home, unless it's a European starling, a house sparrow, or a rock pigeon. Those three species are not protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty because they are not native to North America.
Right. And the bird sanctuary has a.
Oh,
go ahead.
I don't know if you mentioned also the American Birding Association has a birding code of ethics on their website, and I think I have a link to it on my website too. And I think,
Yeah, and that's what we went over a little bit in the beginning of our presentation. I didn't go over every step, but we definitely will include that link and that information in kind of our follow-up resources so that you can look back at that and use that as a resource. Thank you for mentioning that, Terry, for sure. We had a couple other questions, like if you hit a bird with your car, is it still okay to like move it to a tree? Or, so there are like I had said in the beginning, like there are split-second decisions about like, oh, this bird fell out of the nest. Should I leave it here or should I like shoo it out of the road? Like, there are those moments where you can take some action without, harassing or disturbing a bird. So yes, if you had a bird land on the top of your car and you pulled over and put it into the ground, you would not, that would be fine, or onto a tree, that would be fine. And then, hey, there's a question or a comment here from Leah. She's saying, Elliot, that she read the article attached to the MSU Extension Sea Grant email about winter bird watching in the Eastern Upper Peninsula where you're located, and was wondering, she said it sounded like an outdoor treasure hunt and she got really excited about it, and was wondering if there's any, is there somewhere else that people are putting together that information for other parts of Michigan?
So there are a few resources. We're going to plug some of these, but basically if you go to michiganaudubon.org, they have a link to birding trails around the state. And there are several birding trails. There's actually 9 on their website here. You can see them listed on a map of the state. And each of these birding trails have a website that tells you good spots and what you can see there. Michigan Audubon, as well as some other groups, also have festivals, which is a great place to meet birders and to get out birding. And so here's a list of the spring festivals, and we'll send this to you in a follow-up email, so you don't need to worry about scrambling it down. And there are regional Audubon chapters. None of those are formal kind of informational email or articles like I wrote, but through these resources, you can tap into your local birding resources and find out about some more localized birding groups. For Kent County in particular, like you were asking about, there is actually a Kent County birding email group for just county rarities and Kent County rare birds. And you can reach out to me if you'd like to know how to access that group. But you could also join the Kent County Audubon, the Grand Rapids Audubon Club, and learn about those resources through that club. And that club probably also puts out a newsletter with local bird sightings too, if I recall. So These local Audubon clubs are a really good way to get that localized knowledge.
Yeah, thanks for that, Elliot. Trying to scroll through some of the other questions here.
I saw one for Terry. Somebody said, what was your favorite bird during your big year?
Wow. Wow, that's hard.
That's a thinker, huh?
323 species. This is going to sound strange, but I'm going to have to say the black-capped chickadee, because the secondary goal I made for myself when I started this, I thought there's no way I'm going to be competitive in species. So I just set a goal to bird in all 83 counties of Michigan. And I think I have black-capped chickadee in all 83 counties.
Wow. That is so cool that one of the most common birds in all of
It
Michigan
certainly
is your
is,
favorite
yeah. And
favorite
it's
big year
widespread.
bird.
Yeah, it wasn't maybe not the most exciting. There was some that
No,
my first Harlequin duck I had of the year, I risked my life going out on the Pier Marquette Pier in Muskegon in January, and it was on a rough day. There was 8-foot waves. They were crashing over the pier, but there was a Harlequin out there, and I didn't have a Harlequin duck yet. And I came back and I couldn't bend my arms or legs because my clothing was frozen, and I waddled back on a sheet of ice back to the truck. So that was probably the most exciting one. But the chickadee was it seemed like he was my friend. He was everywhere.
Yeah, that's a great one. Misty, there's one I would like to answer if it's okay. So Dave Larson asked, and this is a question about listing, right? So for some of us, we really like to have our Michigan list really big. And so let's say you're on Lake Michigan, and you let's say you're maybe somewhere near a state border, right? So you're standing on Lake Michigan up in the UP on the very edge of the Upper Peninsula, and you're looking out into Wisconsin waters, and you see a new bird for Michigan. So you're looking across the state line, and you're standing in Michigan, but the bird is across the line in Wisconsin waters. Is that bird countable on your Michigan list? Well, you can make your own rules. Most people do, but there is the American Birding Association, which has that code of ethics that Terry talked about, and they also have listing guidelines on there. And from my recollection, it is where the bird is, not where you are, that matters. And so like I'm here in the Sault Ste. Marie, and my office looks out over the St. Mary's River. And I spent one winter looking for a Barrow's goldeneye to cross the water and come on our side. And it took me a month, and I saw it probably a dozen times in that month. And every time I saw it, it was over in Canadian waters, and I couldn't count it on my Michigan list until finally a month later, I found it by the Sugar Island Ferry in Michigan waters. So, so if you want to get real technical, you can. A lot of people don't care that much, and they just put it on the list that they want to put it on, because birding's about what you want to do with it. So, but yeah. Yeah. Did you have any experiences like that, Terry, with the bird in Canadian waters? Or
yeah, there was just recently in St. Clair, there was a couple of ducks that were moving back and forth between Canadian and Michigan waters, and the same thing was true with that a northern gannet that was flying back and forth by Port Huron, that it was seen over close to the Canadian shore, and then they were waiting for it to come back closer to the Michigan shore. I didn't personally have, there was a couple of times I had thought about that when I was in the Sioux, looking, and I had a golden eagle, and fortunately I saw it from Michigan on Sugar Island, which is part of Michigan, but it occurred to me that I could see Canada just as well.
Nice. Elliot, we have a question here just about eBird, and you had talked a little bit about how eBird kind of assesses how how birds get documented. And so a person was just saying that, hey, sometimes they've submitted a picture, or maybe they've submitted something, but it didn't they didn't see it included or they didn't see it added to eBird. Do you have any thoughts about that and
Yeah.
how they screen different submissions?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the more tricky things in essentially when you're running a citizen science database, you have to have some sort of standard or vetting process to kind of check that information. And sorry, I got a call there. And so sometimes the eBird reviewers won't feel they have the sufficient information to rule out other species, especially with a tricky ID, like let's say a northern goshawk. That can be a really hard bird, in an immature northern goshawk, to differentiate from a large immature Cooper's hawk. And so if you report that and the information just isn't, the reviewer doesn't feel they have enough information to make a decision, it may not get approved. But that's a good moment to think about, okay, how can I in the future, if I'm really into documenting rare birds, think about ways that I could document them more extensively. Photos help, but written descriptions are also really good. And it's important to write down, have a field notebook and put that stuff down as quick as you can. And if the eBird reviewer doesn't approve it, it's okay. Not all birds do get approved in eBird. So, and especially with the review committee, that's even more, you got to get 7 people to approve it, or 8, I can't remember how many are on the committee, or 4 if it's a majority. So yeah, sometimes they don't get approved, but don't let that get you down. It doesn't really change anything. Nobody's making a judgment on your birding abilities, just on whether or not that data can help them rule out the species or not. So.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation, Elliot. I think we're running over time, but I wanted to 2 things. One is somebody asked if we could talk about how to document this class and that they've taken it. Some of you might be a conservation steward or a Michigan Master Naturalist, and you're taking this class for continued credit. Just send me an email. I'm happy to send you documentation that you attended all the classes, and we'll get you set to get those credits. And then we had I don't know if maybe this can be our goodbye, but they want to know from all of us panelists, if you could go anywhere for birding in Michigan this spring, where would you go and what time would you go? So I'll let us all answer. Jen is still also on the line. Jen, do you wanna answer? Do you have an answer? No, she says no. She doesn't have one right on hand. That's okay. I'm gonna say I really want to go to Seney National Wildlife Refuge. I haven't gone there, and I like riding my bike, and I want to ride my bike and bird in the Seney National Wildlife Refuge area. So that's one of my goals this spring. And I'm thinking I want to go in like April, May. There's my answer. What do you do, Terry or Elliot? Do you want to take the next question?
Yeah, I want to go to Taos Point in mid-May. I love being around birders, and the bird variety there is incredible.
I was going to say the same thing after that Taos in May is just spectacular.
I typically have a early May pilgrimage to Berrien County. It is one of my favorite places to go birding because I can see birds there that I can't see in the UP. It's one of our few places in the state where there's nesting yellow-throated warblers. I can get to see prairie warbler over at Warren Dunes, which is a great bird, and a few other kind of southern specialties. So Berrien County is one of my favorite places to go in early May and to get some of those southern specialties.
I love it. Well, thanks everyone for being a part of the class. We really appreciate all of your questions and learning with you. We'll follow up with more details from today's class like we have been for our previous classes, and share our contact information with you. So you can always reach out to any of us if you have questions. And we look forward to seeing you again. So thank you so much. And we hope to see you at another class, or maybe out birding at Taos Point or somewhere else. Maybe we'll see you there. All right. Have a great night.
Bye, everyone.
I appreciate the opportunity, Elliot.
Yeah, I see we still have a few folks on, but Carrie, we do a quick debrief if you want to talk anymore, but you don't have to if you don't want to.
I could talk all day, but I'm not going to.
Okay. All right.
Read my blog.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks, buddy.
Good seeing you, Terry. Bye.
You too.